All of us want to be who we are, to be confident in ourselves and to love ourselves. But for women, as we get older, we worry about the graying hair, the sagging chin, the wrinkles on our neck. What is it that we can do to overcome these insecurities in us? This is Between Us, Stories of Unconscious Bias. I am Smitha Tharoor.
Hi everyone. I would like to introduce Seema Anand. Seema and I have already done an interview in season 2, where we explored unconscious biases that many people around the world have about the book, the Kama Sutra. But today we will be having a conversation of a much more personal nature. To remind listeners, Seema is a storyteller, mythologist, and author of the book, Arts of Seduction. She specializes in women's narratives with a focus on erotic literature of ancient India. Seema is also a weekly columnist for the Times of India on matters of intimacy. You can follow Seema on Instagram to learn more about her work. But what I should also add is that Seema is a dear friend. Over the 25 years of our friendship, we have had very many conversations about perception, our personal narratives, and far, far longer, much longer than the word unconscious bias has become popular. We've been talking about something that we call unconscious biases. So I'm really pleased that Seema has agreed to join me for round 2 of an unconscious bias storytelling conversation, because it's something that we've already explored and talked about on many levels. So thank you, dear friend Seema, for joining me today.
It's so lovely to be with you, Smita. And yes, I'm looking forward to our conversation again.
Exactly. And if you remember, and I'm talking easily, 15 years ago, and we talked about narrative. I don't think that's the word we used, and about how our stories influence us without us realizing it. Or maybe 20 years ago, I've lost track. And then somewhere along the line, somebody said unconscious bias, and you and I looked at each other and said, hang on a minute, that's what we're talking about.
So yes, we had this long conversation. We used to talk about the fact that the stories settle into our heads. We have our preconceptions, and they are so solidified in our brains that to let any new idea come in, you have to shift that entire solid mass of stories before you can make room for a new one. And hence, we used to say we talk about looking at a story because the story already exists. It's about understanding how to look at it from a slightly different viewpoint so you can understand what you're doing. And we talked about it for a long, long time before we actually got the terminology. And now we have terminology.
There we go. And somebody else created the terminology, but we were talking about it. And that's why I thought this is perfect. Rather than talking about a book, which is what you and I did for season 2, let's just talk about our lives, our stories. So what kind of story do you want to share with us, Seema?
So I think one of the biggest things that seems to hit me in the face these days is this whole idea about age. There is just so much preconception. There is so much ideating around this concept of age, of what is expected of you, your narrative when you get to a certain age. And it's one of the things that I get trolled for the most. It's one of the things that I get praised for the most these days. And it's absolutely unbelievable how how rock solid our ideas are around age. I mean, one of the things that I get told, especially since, well, the basic difference between you and I, who are exactly the same age, is the color of our hair, isn't it?
Well, I've just got lucky genes. That's all I can say. I mean, I don't dye my hair. And it's bizarre that, it's like, where we can find a few gray hairs, but it's strange. Whereas you obviously started graying when you were in your early 30s, if not, or maybe younger.
No, I was in my early 20s when I started to gray.
Yeah.
And so, there we are, ebony and ivory, when it comes to our hair. And both of us are in our natural state.
But that's what's so interesting, though, because let's just take this one example. I want to go deeper into this idea of age and how people are perceived. Now, I'm not doing anything to look the way I do. I haven't done any plastic surgery. I do not dye my hair, but that's just my luck, for want of a better word, because this is what I have. These are my genes. And as you said, you and I are the same age. So people might look at you and me together in the same room or on the same screen right now and say, Seema is obviously older. Why? Because head of hair is predominantly white and my head of hair is predominantly black or dark brown or whatever you call it. And it's just so superficial.
It is, and not
That's
just
all it
that, but
is.
they're likely to look at my gray hair and sort of put me in a different category of how they even talk to me and the subjects they might bring up with me. So yeah, I do become automatically older because I have gray hair.
Seema, when you say they, are we talking about any day? I mean, you and I both live in London, just for the record, for all our listeners. Are we talking about people in London that you come across socially? Are you talking about, use the word troll earlier on, and certainly many of our listeners will know that you have quite a large following on Instagram. Are we talking about people maybe who communicate on there? Are you talking about when you visit India and you communicate, or any other country? Who is they to you?
I think literally everybody. So now when I'm in London and I go on the tube, if I sit on the seat that is reserved for the elderly, I'm okay. Nobody will give me a funny look.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah. So, I'm all right. Whereas if you were to sit over there, somebody might kind of look at you and think, well, maybe you need to make room for somebody else. So it is across the board. But over the last 2.5 years of being locked in, of being sort of divorced from the outside world, most of our interaction has been with people on social media, and definitely the comments on social media. It's really funny because either you get the trolls, the idiots who will say, oh my god, look at your age, and then with a lot of very nasty words added to it, and how dare you be talking about sexuality, because clearly sexuality and pleasure is perceived as something that only the young should be doing. Or you get the other side of it, the people saying, oh my god, I absolutely love your gray hair and I want to be like you when I'm older. And then you have people sort of saying, aren't you amazing that even at this age you're talking about this? And like you said, you and I have known each other for so long that we have been talking about the same thing for years. Like, this is our conversation. And it's exactly the same words that I'm using, but they take on a different flavor today because of the gray hair and the fact that I turned 60 this month and so on. It changes it. So the other thing that I get now is the many different things that come along. One is that with age, people perceive that you would become less less pleasant looking. I don't know. Now, is that the right word? Or certainly not sexy looking.
Hold on,
And so,
pause this a minute, because there are a couple of things you said earlier that I want the listeners to capture. And you said, I mean, because this is a very important point you've just made, so I want you to pause that. You said essentially when people look at you, I mean, and because of social media and so on, look at you might be the wrong word, but communicate with you. They say, isn't it amazing that at your age you can talk about? Or they say, gosh, at your age you can talk about?
yeah,
So the point that you're making in that first part of the conversation is that because you are visually the age you are, and this is also about perception, right? If
yeah,
somebody is looking at you and making an assumption about your age, and they're not far wrong about it, but that's not the point.
mhm,
Um, and they make an assumption about how old you are purely because of how you look. And then based on that, their unconscious biases kick in and they say, oh God, imagine talking about sex at the age of 60. That's very brave of her. I'm adding words. Or
mhm.
how wonderful it is that at your age. So are they suggesting, and I just want to explore that for a couple more minutes, are whoever there is, people commenting or your understanding of it, are people suggesting that once you kind of hit 60 or older, sex is a taboo subject? You are not allowed to have sex. You're not allowed to communicate about sex. What is that about?
Yeah, it is basically everything from, and let me translate into English. Look at the age you are at. This is your age for sitting down and doing part puja to do your prayers. And how dare you be talking about this? Or, oh my God, at this age, this old woman has a lot of game in her, in a really nasty way. Or, um, shouldn't you stop talking about this at least at this age? So it's very much about, you get to a certain age and how dare you be talking about sexuality. So clearly in their head, that belongs to somebody who is much younger. And if you're much younger and talk about it, of course, you'll get abused in a different way. But the very fact that somebody thinks that you get to my age, you wouldn't believe the number of people who write in and say, isn't this your age now to be going and doing your prayers? And there was one woman along the way who actually stood up and yelled back at one of the trollers who'd said this. And I thought she was amazing because she really took up cudgels on my behalf. And she was like, is there an age to say your prayers? Are you too young to be? I mean, do you not say your prayers at this age? What do you mean, what age you are? And this is the age you're supposed to be saying your prayers. And I thought that was absolutely the most brilliant point to make, that, is there a particular age when you're only supposed to be saying your prayers? But yes, there is this thing that I've got to this age now. Anything pleasurable is taboo for me. How dare I? The other day I did a reel, forget about sexuality. I did a reel on a handloom sari, and it was just about promoting this particular weaver, and it was handloom day in India and so on. And I, from everybody else going, this is so beautiful, one person who's oh my god, this old woman has a lot of game, and another one was like, oh auntie, oh daddy, oh grandma, you better stop, otherwise you're going to break a hip, and so on. And so there is this thing about, you've reached a certain age, how dare you be living your life? So there is definitely a huge
I want to
amount
put
of
to you something
angst.
in relation to unconscious bias and people of a certain age being considered to be even older. And that is specifically in India. Now, we are both Indian, but we both live in London and we've lived here for half our lives. But we go back all the time, 3, 4 times a year. Um, we both have mothers who are in their 80s. Um, and if you try and look back, say 20 years, when you've gone back to India, I have noticed that and this is about two things that I've noticed. One is about the gender, and two is about the age. When women start becoming older, and I'm specifically talking about India, I have not seen that so much in the UK, and I'm curious to know what you think. But women start getting older. So once, for example, a woman turns 60 or 65, or that kind of age, and especially in our mother's generation, those days, a woman at the age 60, 65 is very often already a grandmother, as your mother and my mother was when they were 60. And so they're grandmothers, they are already 60 years old. And if they go anywhere, they perceive themselves to be old, number one. And I'm just kind of throwing this at you.
Mm.
And then number two, an equal number one, should I say, rather than number two, equal number one, the society around them automatically feels they're showing the respect to an older person, because the Indian tradition is you must show respect to older people. Certainly the North Indian tradition, for example, is if a young person goes into a home where there is an older person. So if somebody who's 10 or 15 comes into someone's home and there's somebody who's around 45, the expectation is the 10-year-old will touch the feet of the 45-year-old. That is about
Or at
showing,
least call them auntie.
or call them auntie. That is about showing respect. And that is how it's been ingrained in their culture, in the person's culture. Now, fast forward another 20 years, and that person is now, say, 65 rather than 45. And that young person has already decided that the 65-year-old is old and must be given a chair to sit, his hand must be held to walk, and so on. I mean, what is that about? What are your comments on that?
So again, I
Is it a
think that
cultural unconscious bias, is the question I'm asking.
yeah, so as I was saying, again, I think it depends literally on the social strata that you're in. I think that makes a huge difference because my mom, at the age of 60, she was one of the most happening women around town. She's been a political hostess for a long time of her life. She's never really been somebody that one thinks of as older. She's always been terribly popular at all the parties and so on. So I think that it is very much about social strata. I think it's also about how you choose to present yourself. And I think that up to that point, we're still okay. So people would come in to see mom at that point, and even when she was 75, it'd be like, fine, they're ready to call her auntie, but she's the auntie that they can have fabulous conversations with, or she's the auntie who has a drink with them, or you know what I mean, like she's the She's the cool auntie, put it that way. Yeah. Now what happens is that, and of course, her friends are exactly like that. So, within her social circle, she wouldn't ever have that issue. I thought it was quite funny when my mother decided to go gray. She had gone gray and she'd come to pick me up at Delhi airport one time. And this is the same woman that I have seen her swish into nightclubs with her sari at the age of 75. And everybody sort of saying, oh my God, your mom's a hottie. She came to pick me up at the airport, the same woman. This was a hot Monday morning, Delhi airport, which is rather congested, as you know. And she was in a salwar kameez with her gray hair tied back and not an enormous amount of makeup. And one of the people who was trying to get around her said, Mata ji, zara ek minute, like he addressed her as old mother.
Old mother.
Yeah, old mother.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I still remember this moment because we both kind of stood where we were. I was heading towards her, about to give her a hug, and we both just kind of stood stock still because it was like, oh, you're Mataji now, because the gray hair has kicked in. So I think, and up until 76, mom was dyeing her hair black. So you wouldn't call her Mataji. You won't call her old mother. Yeah, she's visibly an older person who's sort of not sort of striding across, but walking at the pace that you normally would, very upright and all the rest of it, but literally just that. So she became Mataji, in that moment. So yes, I just feel that there is a limit to how much shifting can happen in the brain. I think that this is just too ingrained, too deeply ingrained. You look at a particular person and you just automatically believe that they are old because there's gray hair on their head.
Right. I had rudely interrupted you earlier, Seema, and you had begun to say something about, I think you used the fact that when people look at you, there are some aspects of you, and I think was it looks? May I just remind you, capture?
So I was saying that I get people writing in. So I'll start with this just to you get an understanding of what I was trying to say. You get people writing in saying, oh my God, you look so good at this age. How fab you must have looked in your younger days. Or send us a photo of your younger days. Oh my God, you must have been an absolute heartbreaker in your younger days. And I get a lot of these messages. And I always smile to myself because you've known me for long enough. And personally, I think that I look my best today. I don't think that I looked better when I was younger. I think that I'm one of those fortunate ones who've actually gone better looking with age. So I think I do actually look better today than I did when I was younger. Maybe everybody just has a cycle of looks, but I definitely look better today. But to me, all this comes down to the fact that the hair is gray, and hence, oh my goodness, I'm giving you a compliment that in spite of your gray hair, you look amazing, but you must have looked so much better when you were younger. And that's another unconscious bias that we automatically assume that youth is prettier. And I have to agree that youth is beautiful anyway, because when you're younger, you don't have to worry or think about anything. Everybody looks gorgeous in their younger days. But to think that you looked better then is what I'm getting to. That's the point I'm trying to make. And just before we actually discuss this, I want to say that I found an interesting development over here. Now, with gray hair, we have always used the words, elegant for a woman with gray hair. We've used the word beautiful, gracious, lots of wonderful words come into play for women with gray hair. I find that I'm getting a lot of comments now saying, you look so sexy with your gray hair. And I'm loving that because I hope I'm one of the people who's helped to change that vocabulary.
I love that. And I was also thinking, I think you look very beautiful with your gray hair. I think you've always been a beautiful woman, but there's something else now in the last 2-3 years from whenever you stopped dyeing your hair that has a different beauty about you. And so then I would ask you, because we're talking about unconscious bias here. So then I would throw out at you, are you more beautiful now than you've ever been? not just because your hair is white, gray, rather than black, but because you've grown into yourself as a human being. And as we all get older, we become more self-confident, more can't be bothered with society, or the trolls aren't keeping you awake at night. Let's put it that way.
You're probably right. I think that that's always a factor in it. But according to my children, there's a very definite physical aspect to it as well. So my daughter, for instance, who's the youngest of the lot, will say to me often that, you look your best now than you ever have, because you've also learned how to carry yourself properly. You've learned how to do your makeup properly. You've learned how to dress in a way that absolutely suits you. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I do feel that I look better today than, aside from the fact that various creases appear on your face and so on,
Well,
and the bags under your eyes.
That's just what it is. But no, but I guess therefore, from if I were to put that slightly differently, whether it's you and me or anyone else of our similar age, it's an internal beauty. That's what I'm suggesting. Because when we talk about beauty, we're always looking at cover of a book. Don't judge a cover. This silly old phrase. Don't judge a book.
No, absolutely. But this is,
and I get judged and you get judged because of the cover.
Absolutely. But there's always that thing about inner beauty. No, but I am specifically also talking about physical beauty over here, where I am saying that, the people who are writing into me are not talking about the fact that I am a beautiful person from the inside. They're saying, you look so amazing now, you must have. I actually have people taking screenshots of videos and then editing them out, editing out things and sending them and putting it up on social media and saying, this is what she must have looked like when she was younger. And I didn't look anything like that. You know what I mean? I looked very different. I just did.
No, and the phrase that you used, editing out, the fact that people want unconscious biases about looks and age and perception about how we look. And the fact that, the vast majority of people, and it's not a criticism, it's just how it is, like to edit out certain aspects and make everything perfect, which is very hard, and especially amongst women. What we want to be is who we are, complete and whole, whatever that means. Whether it's a sagging belly or a sagging chin or whatever it might be, or gray hair. And what does that mean to us? And I'm specifically bringing just gender in, to us women who are listening and might be watching. I don't know in which manner they'll be hearing this podcast, listening into this idea of unconscious bias, and how is it that we can support ourselves? What can we do going forward? Or what kind of advice that can we give to other women? Whether they're gray, fat, whether they're double chinned, whether they've got spots on their face, whatever it might be at any age. How does one feel confident enough? That's why I brought up the idea of inner beauty to external beauty. And so, you should be more beautiful at youth rather than now. What is that about? Yes.
So I think that it's something that we all feel, we're all human and we all have our insecurities. And every now and then you will look at an extra line that's appeared over there and think, oh my God, I got this line too. My problem is that because I'm not one of those people who worry too much about being out in the sun, I have the most awful pigmentation. Also, because when I was younger, I had leukoderma. And the medication that I took for it, I'm very fortunate. I'm fully cured, because at one point I had it all across my eyes and under my eyes and on my nose, etc. Now, the medicine that I had to take and the treatment that I took was quite aggressive. And it's left me with really patchy skin. And yes, every now and then I will look at, there are patches on either side of my nose, just where the nose meets the eyes, which have become blue black. So they become really dark. And if I kind of sit with my profile to you, you can see them. Now, if I'm there in person live with you and I'm chatting to you and we're all laughing and giggling, you won't notice. Well, a lot of people might not notice them. Maybe people do. I don't know. But in photos, they certainly show up. Or when you look at yourself in the mirror, there are things that show up. And we don't like the look of that. But the way I see it is that so long as you can get past that, so the first time you see it, you're not going to like it. You're going to be like, oh my God, that's another thing happened to me. And then how quickly it takes for you to put it behind you or to become so used to it that it just becomes part of you. Because let's face it, the body does go through certain changes as you get older. And you have to learn to accept them. And they are part of you and they're not bad at all, but they do feel terrible because they're new in our lives. And I can totally understand why women, we're talking gender particularly, why women feel upset about it. Because, you suddenly go from, I mean, I've slowed down so much, Smita, that, I can say, oh my God, I now can't run up the stairs at the same level as I used to before. I walk slower when I go up the stairs. But it's okay for us to say that. Somehow we feel that we should not be saying that about, you can feel bad about the fact that I can't run around as much as I used to. But to verbalize that you feel bad about the fact that, oh my God, now, this particular line over here has just become a lot more defined. Somehow we don't give ourselves permission to feel bad about that. And I always think that in stopping ourselves from feeling something so natural, we don't get to move on. I have moved on from the fact that I can't run up the stairs so much. I've kind of bemoaned the fact. I've kind of cried about it. And I've kind of got used to the fact, yeah, fine, I'm going to go slower up the stairs. But if I can't articulate it and I have to keep it always inside me that, oh my God, the shift in my face is making me feel a certain way, how do I get past it? Why can't I talk to my friends about that? It is only human, isn't it? And you need to be able to say it and then move past it.
So I think that's a very good point. It's about articulation or articulating what we are concerned about, whatever that might be, whether it's pigmentation on the skin, whether it's your hair going white, whether it's, a flabby, sort of wrinkles in my neck, whatever it might be. As we get older, we need to articulate it amongst our friends, you're saying. And the other point, though, also is that because we are, I hadn't anticipated that we talk so much about gender as much as about age, but I think to my mind it's connected. If I was speaking to somebody who is a man, who's a successful man, you're a successful woman in your career. If I was speaking to a successful man who is turning 60 this year, in August, as you correctly said, happy birthday in advance.
Thank you.
We would not even have this conversation, I don't think.
No, we wouldn't. We wouldn't. It would be, he would be at the prime of his life. A man who's 60, turning 60, let's say next week.
I was already very successful. Like you are.
Yeah.
I'm doing like for like. Who has gray hair? Completely white.
Yeah. You wouldn't even think about it. It'd be like, yeah, whatever, But yes, it is more of a gender thing. And it's suddenly like, and also, like I said, maybe if I was doing something that is age appropriate according to society, maybe that would be okay. Maybe nobody would think about it. I would automatically pass into this area of the older woman who is doing the right things. But the fact that you choose to, well, I mean, like I said, Smita, as you know, I started my work so many decades ago. It isn't something that I'm choosing to do today.
Exactly.
It's ongoing work. But it's now suddenly become worthy of mention as someone older doing it. So much so that I've actually had people who've asked me to do reels for them for promotions or campaigns who've insisted that I put in the sentence saying, and even at the age of 60, look, I'm doing this.
So any last sort of tips or advice or support that you can give to our listeners in going forward? How do we, people who might only have might be freaking out because they just turned 30 or just turned 40 or just turned 50, who knows? These are all numbers, I know. But we do worry about it. Women I'm talking about. Any advice to these women around the world who have got to some birthday with a zero at the end and is worrying about them getting older?
My daughter and her friends, just like your youngest one, are all turning 25. The amount of angst that there is that they're all turning 25. I actually bought the meanest card for my daughter's best friend, which said, I hate to tell you, but your childhood has expired. And she was like, how can you say this to me? Well, like I said, Smita, it is literally, it's the progression of life. It happens. I think that we should, when we use that term, be kind to yourself, I think that we should give ourselves the chance to cry about it if that's what you feel like doing. Because once you've had a good old cry about it, you can actually move forward. We all do. You get used to something so quickly. And you get to the next point and you suddenly, like most of us will say, oh my God, I'm 60, but I don't feel 60. Oh, I'm 50, but I don't feel like I'm 50. In my head, I'm 18. We don't feel any different. It's only perceptions of the outside world that make us feel a certain way. And a day before yesterday, I went for my first pole dancing class. And I have to tell you, for anybody out there who is wanting to try it, I was so bad at it, Smita, I could not get holding onto that pole. I couldn't get both feet off the ground. Literally, not even that, not even 1 inch off the ground. My instructor was sort of floating up and down that pole like she was on wings. And I'll tell you what did happen though. I had gone in with a really sore elbow where I had made an appointment with the doctor today to go and get medication for it because it's been so bad I can't even lift up a cushion or a pillow. And I was a bit nervous about what it was going to do to my elbow, but I was determined. Hanging from that pole, do you know what? The elbow pain is gone. So, okay, my advice to everybody is whatever milestone birthday you get to, go for a pole dancing class. Honestly, it's going to make you feel a whole different person, the excitement of it.
I love it. I think on that note, I am going to pause this conversation. Considering you and I have known each other for so long, I'm sure we might have a third interview at some point. But for now, Seema Anand, thank you so very much for sharing your stories of unconscious bias.
Thank you for having me. Love you.
Thank you for listening to Between Us, Stories of Unconscious Bias. I am Smita Tharoor. It is you, the listener, that makes this podcast what it is. If you like this podcast, please do share. If any of you anywhere in the world feel that you have stories to share, please do connect with me on social media at Smita Tharoor on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or on my company page, Tharoor Associates, on Facebook. We will be back next week.